morning. It's actually a much better morning than it was a few hours ago. If you all saw the rain last night, I'm delighted that it stopped just for this event today, historic as it is. Welcome today to what we're calling our Flag Day celebration, both to honor Flag Day in the United States as well as the 175th anniversary for the Somerville, the community of Somerville, because 175 years ago we separated from Charlestown, some nice folks over there, but we wanted our independence. And so in 1842 we did just that. And so this whole year, 2017, we're celebrating our 175th anniversary. So today we have the pleasure of having a very special visitor here from St. Louis that's going to tell us a little bit more about our Grand Union flag than maybe many of you know. And before that occurs, I would like to introduce the ward alderman for this area, Bob McWaters. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Brandon, and thank you for all the hard work that you do for the city and your staff. I want to thank the residents for coming out today on this dreary, dank day. That's better. I'm 6'3". It's hard when you're leaning down. But this is one of the fabulous things that our city is able to do. We're engaged with our residents. We're able to take many events on the road, and I appreciate everything that the city does in terms of historic perspectives. As Brandon mentioned, we're celebrating the 175th year of our existence, our separation from Charlestown and Boston. This is the third largest open space area in the city. Also, the restoration and renovation of the tower was effectuated by CPA money, the first CPA money that the city utilized from the residents and your taxes was done to renovate this historic building here. So we appreciate the residents and what you have done also adding to the fabric of this community. I'd also like to acknowledge my colleague, Alderman-at-Large Jack Conley. Jack's been on the board many more years, has a lot of institutional knowledge, and I appreciate that Jack is here today. I'd like to call him up to say a couple of words. But again, I want to thank everyone for coming out today and thank you for your participation. One other thing, next on June 29th, if I may, the city's going to have a community meeting right in this park. They're applying for a grant for further restoration. So I welcome everyone to be here on the 29th at 6 p.m. I'll be here with the city administration, and we would love your input. So on the 29th, come by. There'll be a community meeting, so everyone's welcome to give their input. So thank you for coming. Here's my colleague, Jack Conley.
Thank you, Bob. And as a ward alderman for quite a while in Ward 6, I can honestly say that knowing what a ward alderman has to do, Bob is a real all-star. He's got his ears always open. He's never too busy to take the time to talk to you, and he gets things done. And that's really the measure of what a ward alderman should do. And we're very fortunate that he's on the board and he cares compassionately about people. And I'm really delighted here. I had a chance to speak with Mr. D'Elia here for quite a while prior to us getting started today. And he's just got some fascinating information about our history here, especially here with the first flag of the United States. It's quite compelling, and please, if you have an opportunity, please speak with him and also grab his book because there's so much information there. As a lifelong resident of the city, I'm still learning things, and thanks to Byron, we'll be hearing quite a bit of them. I think it's only fitting, however, especially since we're here in the presence of what we've come to know the term vexologist, the study of flags. Well, this is one of the preeminent vexologists in the United States, Mr. Byron D'Elia. Perhaps, Byron, you could come up and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I think would be only too appropriate if you'd be so kind.
Very good.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Byron D'Elia.
Thank you, Alderman. Let's face the Grand Union. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Okay, can I say something?
Sure.
Okay, a couple of other introductions I would also like to make. My name, by the way, is Brandon Wilson, and I am the Executive Director for the Historic Preservation Commission, which is the group that actually sponsors a lot of the historic events in the city of Somerville over many years. It's a voluntary body of 14 people that oversees the historic districts in the city. All around Prospect Hill, you'll find that there are a number of local historic districts as well as throughout the city. So I also want to acknowledge today that what Alderman Conley has also said, which is that CPA is responsible, the funds of CPA have been responsible for us restoring the tower, enabling us to open it up once again to the public on a periodic basis. So we are actually doing that on a Thursday evening once a month as well as a Sunday. The schedule is posted on the gates now. It's also on the city's website, so for those of you who are here today or not here today, watching this on cable TV or any other place, please know that just go to the website and you can find the other dates that the tower will be open. I want to also introduce just very briefly Arne Franzen, who is here on behalf of the CPA committee, or the CPC, stands for Community Preservation Act, but they are a committee. And he is here today with a table and maybe wants to say a few words about CPA and one of their goals.
Hi, my name is Arne Franzen. I'm actually the Director of Parks and Open Space for the City of Somerville, so it's a real pleasure to be here and to start thinking about, as the Alderman said, we're planning to renovate this park, and so we're having a community meeting on the 29th, Thursday evening the 29th, and it's really a pleasure to think about what this park is going to be and to look forward to that process. I think people have talked to us for years about the potential of this space and truly trying to recognize its history and what it means in terms of its site as the first flag raising, as Washington's camp, and as just the overall history in terms of its significance, not just for Somerville, but for the country. This truly is a national historic site. And so, as the Director of Parks and Open Space, I am one of the people who sits on the Community Preservation Committee, the CPC, and we allocate funds for the various projects that are proposed to us from both city residents and city departments. And the CPA funds are being used have been used already to renovate the tower behind us. That was done last year. So now the tower is open for tours on designated dates. And the next step will be to renovate the park around it. So the CPA has also approved funds for that design process, and as I said before, that will kick off on the 29th. So the CPA actually is a phenomenal resource for the city. It was approved by the City of Somerville residents. It's a surcharge on the real estate tax, and it's used for historic preservation, housing, and open space. And it's a phenomenal way to address projects and take care of things. Just be able to have the financial resources to address those things that the city wouldn't normally be able to. The city, the Board of Aldermen and the administration have got a full load of projects, and you can talk to anybody about all the things that are going on. But the CPC and the CPA funds are truly a great opportunity for us. So I won't go on any further, but just thank you again for coming out. And I've got an email sign-up sheet over on the table over here. If you're interested in participating in the design process for the renovation of the park, please sign up, and we'll send you all the announcements for the upcoming meetings and get you updates on the renovation. All right? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arne. let me just reinforce what he just said, and that is that CPC, as a Director for Historic Preservation for a number of years, has been a critical source of funds for us, because it's one of those areas that I think that often gets neglected, which is maintaining our buildings and historic structures in the city. We've also benefited at the Milkrow Cemetery, and I just want to mention to you that the Milkrow Cemetery, which is usually closed to the public as well, and people haven't been in there even though they've lived in the city for sometimes 30, 40 years, is open periodically as well. We've done a lot of restoration work there over the last 10 years based on a master plan in 2002, and the CPA funds have been used to restore the monument and the tombs, and shortly coming the grave markers there as well. So again, the city website is how you find out when those openings will be, and I encourage you to come down there. We have a docent that will be able to guide you around on those days. We've also started a docent program at the Powder House structure this year, I'm very pleased to say. So we have openings there, again, on the website. We have a brochure that we have on the table over here if you want to learn a little bit about some of the objects that have been placed there to represent the evolution of that area over many centuries. And lastly, I want to introduce somebody very important who is here today as a docent for the Prospect Hill Tower, which is Jessa Piea. And she's dressed in period clothing, you might have noticed. Like myself, this is not the normal attire. But she is here today after the talk to take people upstairs, as you might say, many stairs, to the top of the tower and explain a little bit more about the details of the tower itself. She's the docent here on most of the openings that we have, so if you are not able to stay today, or you have friends or neighbors that were not able to be here, by all means encourage them to come another time. So thank you so much, Jessa, for being here today. Okay, without further ado, let me introduce our very special speaker. For those of you that have braved the winter storms, sleet, and rain, of which we have done a flag raising every year on January 1st for all the years that I've been the director, Byron has actually given a little bit of a talk at that ceremony. But since it is January 1st and it is generally very cold, we've limited him to 5 minutes. So in fairness to him, we've invited him back to actually speak to you for a little bit longer today. I want to also note that for those of you that would like to hear a little longer talk or talk to him more directly, tomorrow at the Somerville Museum there will be another opportunity to hear him. He will be giving an even longer talk there at 2 o'clock, from 2 to 3, and there'll be a reception afterward there as well. So you're invited to that. I want to introduce him a little bit. As you've already heard, he is a very accomplished person. Among his many assets, he is an author, an enviro entrepreneur. This is his description. I must say I have to ask about that. A media producer, and he's been the former U.S. House candidate. He is a member of the Organization of American Historians, the editor-in-chief for a publication called the North American Vexillological Association, better known as NAVA, and he serves with the Publications Committee of the Missouri Lodge of Research. And if that isn't enough, his articles and interviews have appeared in many major news outlets, including NBC News, the Christian Science Monitor, the Los Angeles Times, and others. He's the founding incorporator and the CEO of the Energy Equity Funding, LLC, and he is currently managing director and the Central Regional Executive of the Green Energy Fund. He keeps his fingers on the pulse of a wide range of future-focused projects and serves on boards of various NGOs and nonprofits. So, as you can tell, he's involved in a lot of very important issues of the day, as well as in the past. And today we're asking him to talk about the past, of which he's done a lot of research. And for that we're very thankful, because it's really all about our community here in Somerville. So I'm very pleased to finally introduce for the talk, Byron DeLear.
Thank you, Brandon. I also want to express my appreciation for the city of Somerville for being such amazing stewards to this national treasure, this ground, this hallowed ground, where the research that I've uncovered would indicate that in the moment of time from December 31st to January 1st to January 2nd of 1775 and 1776, we see the actual congealing of the national identity within the ranks of the Continental Army at this very spot, and environs, including Cambridge. And so I'll speak to that in a moment. But I just want to share with you all that this is an exceeding mystery, the origin and provenance of the first flag of America, the Grand Union flag. Because currently, as a historian, as a vexillologist, which vexillology is the study of flags, there is no primary source record that indicates why this particular flag was adopted, the purpose of its design, or when it was adopted. And being that this was a mystery, that has a kind of an invitation built into it for somebody that's curious. And so I've written a book about the creation story, the origin story of the Grand Union flag. And the book's called Revisiting the Flag at Prospect Hill, Grand Union, or Just British. But the interesting thing here is that we see a transitional period in time where we were going from being British subjects to becoming an independent nation. And the Grand Union flag, the story begins with its debut over the Continental Navy's flagship called the Alfred. And it was less than a month earlier than its debut here. So on December 3rd, 1775, we see John Paul Jones, the famous John Paul Jones, raising what he later called the flag of America or the flag of freedom over the Continental Navy's flagship called the Alfred in Philadelphia. That was on December 3rd. And there's several eyewitnesses to this account. We have primary source records that indicate that the flag embodied nationalistic characteristics. In fact, a British spy named Barclay writes on January 10th, I believe, he writes to his handlers that they have hoisted what they call the American flag. So what's critical here is that the flag itself actually embodies nationalistic characteristics. It was also described as the continental flag. And the word continental at the time referred to the whole of the North American colonies. So you had words like Continental Congress or Continental Currency. That referred to the whole of the continental, it embodied a nationalistic character. So when Washington raises this flag on New Year's Day at the dawning of the American Revolutionary Year, 1776, he was attempting to galvanize his troops and build morale in a very harrowing time for the revolution. Hostilities had broken out in the spring of 1775 at Lexington and Concord. And the British were holed up in Boston, and what many of you recognize during what was called the Siege of Boston. And so many of the high grounds around the area were fortified like Prospect Hill. So they had cannon here, they had a fort here. There was a battle where a British ship called the HMS Diana ran aground in what's called the Battle of Chelsea. I think it was referred to as the Battle of Chelsea Creek, but some historians later have revealed that it should probably just be referred to as the Battle of Chelsea. So one of the things that we captured from that battle was a 76-foot mast. And they mounted that 76-foot mast from the HMS Diana right here. And that was a very tall liberty pole. And this was the most visible area to be able to display this first flag of America. And so on New Year's Day, Washington comes here and he raises the Grand Union flag. And we have primary source records that say that there were 13 cheers and a 13-gun salute in compliment to the United Colonies. What's amazing is, through my research, I discovered that the very next day, the words United States of America were written for the very first time. And it's considered the earliest documentary evidence of the name of our nation. And it was written by Washington's aide-de-camp, an Irish immigrant named Stephen Moylan, Esquire, who was the Muster Master General of the Continental Army. And he was writing it from Washington's headquarters in Cambridge. And he's complaining to Washington's favorite military secretary, Joseph Reed, who happens to be in Philadelphia at the time. And he's complaining that why hasn't Congress declared independence? Surely the King's speech, which has just arrived in our lines, shows that they're accusing us of being independent. Why isn't Congress doing it? Look at the King's speech. I'm enclosing it in this letter to you, or into the General's letter, which actually came on January 4th. So this was on January 2nd, 1776. He writes this. And Moylan was a very talented merchant. He was born in Cork, Ireland, and he was educated in Paris, France, and he was a merchant in Lisbon, Portugal, as well as in Philadelphia. And he says to Reed, I would like to take the full and ample powers of the United States of America to Europe to assist in procuring war material. So he's essentially volunteering his services as a merchant to gather that most necessary substance for war, which was gunpowder. The shortages were so desperate at this early stage that actually orders were issued to use wooden harpoons if the British attempted a foray and attacked our lines. Nathaniel Greene issues those orders. He says we should use wooden harpoons, and I believe that wooden harpoons were set up in teepees around the lines just in case there was an attack. So Robert Morris, who's one of the pivotal figures in the creation story of the Grand Union flag, Robert Morris was a member of the Continental Congress. He was one of two men to sign all three founding scripture, the Declaration, the Articles of Confederation, and the Constitution. He's considered the financier of the American Revolution. His contributions have later been overlooked because he wound up in debtor's prison after the 6 million acres that he owned in America collapsed on itself with the rise of Napoleon in Europe, and there was a huge economic bubble. So he was thrown in debtor's prison in the 1790s, and historians have overlooked his contributions. But this gentleman donated the first two flagships to the Continental Navy, the Alfred and the Columbus, and that's where the Grand Union flag was raised the first time in Philadelphia. He owned the first White House, which was a city house in Philadelphia, where Washington's and Adams administrations occupied. He floated the entire colonial economy based on his own personal credit when the economy was collapsing by the end of the war, by issuing what were known as Morris Notes. So Robert Morris is an interesting figure because one of the issues about the Grand Union flag's design that I'll be speaking in some greater detail with some pictorial support as well in a presentation tomorrow at 2 o'clock is the fact that this exact design was in use for 150 years prior as the colors of the East India Company. And so it just kind of really points towards an even more abiding mystery when you consider that you have this logo of one of the first transnational corporations essentially being adopted as our national flag. And yet the history of why it was adopted has been lost. Now, what I discovered was there's a large quantity of Washington's papers and correspondence that have gone missing. And a gentleman named Colonel Tobias Lear, who happens to have been a relative of mine, he was the secretary of George Washington from 1784 until Washington's death in 1799, and recorded Washington's last words, which were "'Tis well." But Lear was in possession of the Washington papers for a full year after Washington passed. And there's a large quantity of his correspondence that has gone missing. And Lear denied it until his death, but we have a letter that Lear wrote to Alexander Hamilton saying, hey, Washington's dead. If there are any letters, and I'm paraphrasing, but if there are any letters or documents of a military nature, let me know and I'll make sure they never see the light of day. So that's pretty much a smoking gun about a significant culling of Washington's papers. Now, how it relates to the Grand Union flag is there were 12 letters that we actually know about between Joseph Reed, Washington's favorite military secretary, and General Washington in November and December of '75, during this critical period when they were adopting regulations for the Army, adopting standards. Reed is one of the authors of one of the only explicit flag directives of the period. Earlier, he had written a directive to fly the Appeal to Heaven flag, which is the pine tree flag, which is a white flag with a pine tree on it, and it says Appeal to Heaven. That debuted here in New England. So we know that those 12 letters exist because in Washington's letters to Reed, which we have because they're in Reed's papers, Washington's saying, hey, I got your letter from the 7th, the 9th, and the 12th, and here's what. So basically, we have evidence that these letters existed, and yet they're missing, and they could very plausibly have contained information about the origin story of the Grand Union flag. Now, why is it important to understand where this flag came from? Well, I mean, in this today and age, I think that it's absolutely essential that we start to promote peer-reviewed history and science. We're living in a time when there's a lot of disinformation going around and a lot of stories that are incorrect. We have actors that are attempting to sow discord and confusion within our media environment. And so I think that it's critical that we understand the DNA and the source code, if you will, of our nation and our society, and how we can then leverage that to understand the values that will propel us into the future. So I'm very, very happy to be able to share some of this information with you. One of the things that I found very fascinating was when I discovered the first documentary evidence of the phrase United States of America and started doing the research into that. This was the day after the flag debuted here on New Year's Day. One of the other things I uncovered was the first publicly printed version of the name of our nation, which was in the Virginia Gazette on April 6th, 1776. And this was in a series of anonymous essays, and the author has never been discovered. But the Virginia Gazette was there were 3 different Virginia Gazettes published in Williamsburg. I guess they didn't believe in brand distinction at the time. they were all called Virginia Gazette. But at this time, Thomas Jefferson was in a kind of period of creative hiatus. And there's maybe 3/4 of a year where he's not publishing anything and he's not doing anything. And yet these 3 anonymous essays appear in the Virginia Gazette arguing for independence. And there's a tally in these articles for the damages that Britain has levied against the United States, against America. And he tallies it as being about $24 million worth of damage. And these are a number of cities that have been torched and burned, forts burned, stores seized. And he says, and he's arguing against people that would want an accommodation to create peace with Britain. And he tallies the damages and he says, what a prodigious sum to pay for peace for the United States of America. And this is the first publicly printed version of the name of our nation in the Virginia Gazette in April 6, 1776. And so I started to do some search in some of Jefferson's writings, and I noticed a couple phrases in the essay that actually were the exact wording that Jefferson used. And so we haven't really done a computer analysis yet to determine if these are actual 3 anonymous essays. And they were signed A. Planter. So there was the Tidewater Plantation Community. These were landowners. And so this was A. Planter was the name. So you may recognize a lot of anonymous articles were written, Publius, and things like this. So the title of these 3 articles were A. Planter. And so it could be very well imagined that these are unknown Jefferson essays that have been discovered. Jefferson then arrives in Philadelphia in May, I believe, and on June 11th, he is beginning the authorship of the Declaration of Independence. And William Safire, who used to write a column for New York Times called On Language, oftentimes delving into the origin of words and etymology and such, he had leveraged a bunch of Oxford researchers and American researchers to try to divine the origins of the phrase United States of America. And he had written an article in '98, and he essentially he concluded through his research that Jefferson was the originator of the name United States of America. And this was because in the original rough draft of the Declaration, it says United States of America in all capitalized letters, set apart from the rest of the text. In Congress assembled, United States of America. And this is the original rough draft that exists. And it was only through the effort to really understand the purpose behind the Grand Union flag and unpack the mystery of this location as being sacred and hallowed ground for the foundation of our nation that has uncovered the fact that indeed the first time United States of America was written on January 2nd, the day after the flag was raised here. So we have a new nation, we have a new flag, we have a new army, and a month earlier the flag was flown over the new Navy. So this is just as important as Independence Hall in Philadelphia. This land is just as significant because you see the congealing of the national identity within the ranks of the Continental Army for the very first time. So I want to thank you all for listening to some of the details and aspects about this cherished area that you have here to take part in, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much, Byron. I just want to remind everybody that tomorrow there is an opportunity to also be sitting down inside. It's supposed to be hot tomorrow, and to hear some more details. He'll have a PowerPoint presentation with lots of slides. I think visuals are always very helpful, and I know he's put a lot of effort into this. I encourage you to take a look at his book, which he will sign for you personally today, I suspect, if you would like. He has some available here today as well. Also, to look at the table that we have here, we have some other information about the CPA program, or CPC, about the Historic Preservation Commission, including some tote bags, which commemorate the Preservation Commission gives out awards each year, 12 awards to people that own either historic or older houses in the city, and have done particularly nice work on it on the exterior. And so to celebrate the 20 years that we've been doing that, we have come up with t-shirts and tote bags with the drawings that were done by the Somerville High School students, the CAD drawings. There's a selection of those houses and the drawings, and the students' names and the address of the properties are on there. It helps fund some of the activities that we do here in the city for historic assets. And also we have some information about the Nathan Tufts Park, as I mentioned, and the Milk Row Cemetery. So I encourage you to stop by there. If you haven't already gone up in the tower, please feel free to do so. Mrs. Woodbridge is up there as a docent to lead you around and guide you a little bit. The view will be good, not as fabulous as it would be if the sun were shining, I suspect, but then again, you would probably be huffing and puffing more if you had the sun out today. So thank you so much for coming today. If you have any further questions for Byron or myself as the Director for the Preservation Commission, I encourage you to come ask us. We'll be here until noontime. And thank you again for, it's not on the microphone? Oh, yes, I'm being reminded that there is a sheet out here to sign up so that if you can get involved in the Prospect Hill Park renovations that will be occurring. We'd love to get your input as residents of the city, and this is a prime opportunity to do that. Arn is here today to answer any questions that you might have about some of the goals that we have for this. Again, it's an application we'll be submitting, and in order to get the funding, there has to be a groundswell of support for it. So again, if you'd like to see this park renovated and any other projects in the city that you might want to propose, please, by all means, come to this meeting on the 29th of this month in June. Is that good? Okay. And any other announcement? Oh, I should also announce, which is not totally related, but another 175th anniversary event that is coming up is actually just happening. We just had the Taste of Somerville on Wednesday, which was hugely successful at Nathan Tufts Park, which I mentioned is a historic park. But now we have what we're calling Foodie Month for the rest of June. So we have 2 weeks where restaurants locally are offering very special deals, either a Prix Fix meal or individual items on the menu at a discount. And all of those restaurants, that are about 20 of them, are on the flyer that's out here, and we post it all around the city. So I encourage you over the next 2 weeks to go to any of those places and enjoy some special treats, including some special cocktails based on another very local tradition and local product, I should say, which is fluff, marshmallow fluff. I know some people are grimacing, and it's not the most healthy thing because we are Shape Up Somerville. However, again, in the in the true spirit of Somerville, we do once a year promote marshmallow fluff, and some of the restaurants are offering some special treats and cocktails based on that delicious product. So I encourage you to try that as well. Be adventuresome here. So there are a lot of other events planned for the 175th. Again, keep checking the website for those that are coming up. And again, thank you so much for coming today. I'd also like to thank today the wonderful music that we've had provided by the bagpiper here, Patrick McDonald. He's really set a nice context for today's ceremony. And I'd also like to thank my wonderful intern, a preservation intern, Lubov McCone, who's been over here at the table welcoming people and introducing them to a lot of the other information and literature that we have about historic assets of the city of Somerville. So thank you again.
Isn't it interesting?
And so what did that have to do with America?
That's what So that's the transition, and
Colony
it's
to
still,
colony.
it's a little murky. So he's done extensive research, and you can tell from his talk he's very knowledgeable, but it's like, you know, there's some to this, there was a citadel, they called it. It wasn't this tower, because that didn't exist until 1903, but they had made some kind of stone structure that I don't know what the number of the captives were, but for 7 months, so from mid-June, until mid-March, they were contained on this promontory, and this was also the same site where the first flag was raised at the beginning of '76 to show our resolve to the crown that we were not about, and the Continental Army had to coalesce. They have had no pay, and they had no promise of any benefit. So that flag was really their national unifying cry.
And so was there a battle here?
No, there wasn't, but it was always where they could survey the harbor, and they could watch the ships. It still is the tallest promontory in the surrounding area. It's a drumlin. That's what its geological construct is. So never really a mountain, but a significant prominence. So I just find it interesting because Somerville didn't really form until 175 years ago as a city. We were considered Charlestown or beyond the neck, which was a long isthmus. So that's why Charlestown gets all the credit.
Interesting.
It is interesting.
Yeah.
You see how, yes, and so there is now a push, shall we say, as Somerville claims its rightful place. Spirit of place. That is what it's all about.
I appreciate the note of rivalry in your voice.
Yes.
I share it.
Well,
thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ben.
Yeah.
How long have you been in this?
Hi, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Did you save a tree yesterday?
No.
Finally decided to pop by.
Yeah.
Same place.
I know.
And my niece.
Oh, well.
And the Swarthmore, the brotherhood and sisterhood of the Swarthmore. And good guy. And said, well, and All that big thing was save as many as you can.
Yeah.
Doing, but it was exciting. It was fun being down there, shopping.
Let's do it.
Hi. Okay, keep waving.
The Battle of Bunker Hill went down? No, it was on Greenstown. The Bunker Hill Day is Monday.
Oh, yeah. It really shines, huh?
Yeah. See the ocean. I don't see the harbor.
Yeah, you can't really.
Yeah.
Nobody thought they would be able to put up a fight like that. Nobody really knew that. Nobody knew it. So he kind of blew it in a lot of ways. Like it might have been cooler if they managed to hold Bunker Hill, but they could have done it. There you go.
You'll hear, they'll call out. So, okay, then I can't give you one until.
We have to climb up first to get a sticker.
Oh, yes.
Right, let's go.
They have to be authentic.
Collector stickers.
Who is the Somerville? Are you?
Oh, we are
all
both
are
Somerville.
actually.
We're all
Yeah,
Somerville.
I just love that name. Hello, and this is an official sticker that everybody who climbs to the top of Prospect Hill Tower gets to have their own sticker that says I climbed Prospect Hill Tower, just like I'm going to give to Mrs. Serpico right now from New Jersey. She has ventured here to get her own from scaling the heights of Prospect Hill Tower.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the day.
It was a wonderful day.
Thank you very much.
I'm so glad. Can share. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of Somerville, Massachusetts. My name is Alma Woodbridge, and I live close to East Prospect Hill. This is a very exciting day because our tower on Prospect Hill has just opened. Earlier this year, 1903, we had a grand celebration right in Union Square. On the plaza, there was a huge tent constructed with festivities and merriment all through the day. Folks did not need to climb to the height of this promontory. No, we could just stand and gaze up at this magnificent structure on top of the hill. The significance of this incredible landscape, this being the tallest promontory of the entire surrounding area. When General George Washington scaled the heights here on the hill, he could gaze out into Boston Harbor just beyond. We cannot see it easily today because of the summer tree line, but he could on that day when he came the end of December 1775, and it filled him with great strength and hope and strengthened his resolve that we could band together, the colonials, to resist the crown and show that we indeed were serious about our freedom and independence from England. Look at this vast sweep of industry beyond us. This is what Somerville represents. American ingenuity, innovation. So many designs were started here, products launched. Somerville has a long and proud history that I am so proud to be a part of. And when you come and scale to the top of the tower, you too can get a special sticker that says, I climbed Prospect Hill. It is a souvenir, a keepsake to treasure forever.